Have you ever wondered what happens when your HOA president decides the neighborhood is her personal kingdom and starts sending armed enforcers to collect petty fines? What if that enforcer shows up at your door waving a badge and a gun over something as stupid as your dog barking at 8:01 p.m.? And what if the one house he picked just happened to belong to the actual county sheriff? I'll tell you exactly how that nightmare played out in our sleepy cul-de-sac, where the grass is always exactly 2.5 inches and the mailboxes all match the approved shade of taupe. My name's Mike. For 6 straight months, my wife Elena and I had been public enemy number 1 in Pineview Estates. Not because we murdered anyone, because our golden retriever Max barked once when the mailman dropped a package. That was all it took for Linda, call me chairwoman, Hargrove, to declare war. Linda was the classic HOA Karen upgraded to boss level. She wore pastel cardigans like armor, smiled with the warmth of a parking ticket, and quoted the covenants like they were the 10 Commandments. Community standards aren't suggestions. Michael, she'd coo at every board meeting while her little clique nodded like bobbleheads. She'd already slapped us with 3 fines, $250 for excessive noise, $150 for non-compliant holiday lights. We left one strand up an extra day, and $300 for visual blight because our welcome mat said welcome. I wanted to fight back. Elena just smiled that quiet sheriff smile and told me, patience, let them hang themselves. So I stayed silent, took the fines, and watched Linda whisper to neighbors that we were troublemakers, watched her fabricate petitions claiming Max was a danger to children, watched her slowly turn our once friendly street into a minefield of side-eye and fake concern. Then came the evening the sun dipped behind the pines and everything changed. A sharp knock rattled our front door. Elena was in the kitchen, still in her uniform after a long shift. I opened it a crack. Standing there was a guy in a cheap polyester uniform that screamed Halloween costume section. Shiny fake badge, utility belt, even a holster. He looked official until you noticed the panic sweat already soaking his collar. Sir? Ma'am. I'm Officer Reynolds with Code Enforcement. We have a violation. Step outside immediately. Elena stepped up beside me, one hand casually resting on her hip where her real badge glinted under the porch light. Max growled low in his throat. The fake cop's eyes flicked to her, then widened when he saw the sheriff's star. Code violation? I asked, keeping my voice even. For what exactly? Dog barking after curfew. HOA Directive 17B. You're both coming with me for processing. He actually raised his voice like he was in a bad cop movie. Then he rested his hand on his gun. Ma'am, I need you to step outside. Now. Elena didn't flinch. She just tilted her head. That slow, deadly smile spreading across her face. The one that always made perps realize they'd screwed up. You know what the real problem is here? Officer Reynolds. Her voice was ice-cold honey. I am the sheriff of this county. His face went the color of spoiled milk. The fake badge actually trembled in his hand. Before he could stutter out another lie, Elena's service weapon was out, trained safely but unmistakably on him. Drop it. Right now. Hands where I can see them. He fumbled like a clown in a circus act. The gun clattered onto the porch. The badge followed, spinning like a cheap coin. This is a misunderstanding, he squeaked. Mrs. Hargrove said it was official. Elena's laugh was soft, almost pitying. Mrs. Hargrove, the same lady who thinks she can deputize her nephew to play swat over a barking dog. Cute. I already had my phone out. Recording. Within minutes, 2 real deputies rolled up. Lights flashing, but sirens off. Professional. Not theatrical. They cuffed the imposter, read him his rights, and hauled him into the cruiser while he kept babbling about HOA authority, and Linda promised me backup. That night we sat on the porch with iced tea. Max curled at Elena's feet like nothing had happened. I shook my head. You made that look way too easy. She shrugged. Most people don't try to pull a gun on the actual sheriff. Big mistake. But we both knew this wasn't over. Linda Hargrove had just sent her own blood relative, because yes, Officer Reynolds was her sister's kid, to our door with a loaded weapon and a lie. And the whole neighborhood had heard the commotion. Curtains twitched. Phones lit up. The rumor mill that Linda had spent months greasing was about to jam in spectacular fashion. The next morning the text started. What happened at your place? Is everything okay? I heard gunshots. I didn't answer any of them. Elena spent the day at the station filing charges. Impersonation of a peace officer. Brandishing. Unlawful entry. The works. Every detail mattered. Time of arrival. Exact wording he used. How he claimed HOA directive gave him arrest powers. She even pulled the body cam footage from the deputies who arrived. Ironclad. Meanwhile, Linda was already in damage control mode. By noon, she'd emailed the entire neighborhood listserv. A regrettable incident occurred last night due to an overzealous contractor. The board is investigating. Please disregard rumors. Classic Karen gaslighting. She even tried to spin it as our fault. The Thompsons have a history of noncompliance. Like that would erase the fact her fake cop had drawn on the sheriff. I watched it all unfold from my office window, sipping coffee and smiling for the first time in months. The woman who'd spent half a year painting us as the neighborhood villains had just handed us the perfect mirror. And I was going to make sure she stared into it until her fake empire cracked. By afternoon, the board meeting invite hit every mailbox. Emergency session. 7 p.m. Sharp. Linda's email promised transparency and resolution. Translation: she was going to try to bury this under more bylaws and fake apologies. Elena and I decided to attend. Not to speak, just to watch. Because the best revenge, as they say, is letting the guilty perform their own execution in public. The community center was packed. Folding chairs squeaked. Linda stood at the podium in her favorite pastel cardigan, clutching her gavel like a holy relic. She opened with her usual sermon. We all want a harmonious neighborhood. Sometimes enforcement requires creativity. A few loyal sheep nodded. Then she saw us in the back row. Her smile froze. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, she purred. All fake concern. We're so glad you could join us after last night's unfortunate misunderstanding. Perhaps you'd like to explain why you felt the need to involve real law enforcement over a simple citation. Elena didn't stand. She didn't need to. She just pulled out her phone, hit play, and let the body cam audio fill the room. Step outside. You're under arrest, HOA Directive 17B Mrs. Hargrove said it was official. The recording caught every desperate lie. Every time the fake cop dropped Linda's name, gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone actually laughed, nervous, but real. Linda's face went through every shade of red. That was taken out of context, she sputtered. He was only trying to uphold the covenants. You people have been flouting rules for months. Elena finally spoke. Voice calm, professional, lethal. Covenants don't authorize firearms. Linda, they don't authorize impersonating police. And they sure as hell don't give you the right to terrorize residents because your ego needs feeding. The room erupted. The vice chair, a quiet guy named Frank who'd always looked terrified of Linda, stood up. I think we need to see the full police report. Another neighbor, the one who'd signed Linda's fake petition against us, mumbled. I didn't know it went this far, even old Mrs. Abernathy in the front row, who usually voted yes to every fine, shook her head and whispered, This is too much. Linda tried one last desperate pivot. This is an attack on the board, on all of us, if we let outsiders dictate. Elena cut her off with the sweetest smile. Outsiders? Sweetie, I enforce actual laws. You enforce grass height. Big difference. That was the moment the laughter started. Real. Unstoppable. The kind of laugh that comes when everyone suddenly sees the emperor has no clothes and is also wearing a clown suit. Linda's gavel banged uselessly. Her eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal realizing the zoo doors were open. I leaned back in my chair and finally allowed myself to exhale. 6 months of silent rage. Of watching this woman weaponize paperwork and peer pressure. Of biting my tongue while she turned neighbors into informants. It was all paying off in the most delicious slow-motion car crash I'd ever witnessed. But the real show was just getting started. Linda's hands shook so hard the gavel slipped and clattered onto the podium like a bad punchline. She tried to regain control, voice climbing into that shrill register every HOA Karen perfects after years of getting her way. This is defamation. I'll sue. The covenants clearly state. Frank, the vice chair who'd spent years cowering, actually interrupted her. Linda, the police report is public record now. Your nephew is in county lockup facing felony charges. Maybe we should vote on whether the chairwoman should step aside pending investigation. The room went dead silent for 3 glorious seconds. Then hands shot up. Real hands. Not the usual 3 sycophants. 14 residents voted yes to an immediate special election for new leadership. Linda stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish that just realized the pond had been drained. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered the $700 in fines she'd gleefully mailed us. The group chat she'd created titled Thompson Watch. The way she'd smiled at the last block party while telling everyone our dog was a menace. Nah. Zero sympathy. Elena and I slipped out during the chaos. Outside, neighbors we hadn't spoken to in months approached us, tentative, embarrassed. Mike, we had no idea she'd go this far. Elena, thank you for being you. One guy even apologized for signing her petition. I just wanted to keep the peace, he muttered. I nodded, kept my face neutral. Inside I was screaming with dark satisfaction. Peace. The woman who preached peace had just sent an armed idiot to our door. Funny how that works. The next 2 weeks were pure poetic justice, served with a side of iced tea on our porch. The fake cop, real name Derek Hargrove, pleaded guilty fast once the DA showed him the body cam and Elena's flawless testimony. He rolled on Linda, admitting she'd paid him $500 cash and promised protection if anything went sideways. Turns out she'd been doing this for years, sending contractors to intimidate anyone who questioned her. The state attorney's office opened a broader investigation into the entire board for misuse of authority. Linda tried everything. She posted tearful videos on the neighborhood Facebook page claiming she was the real victim of overreach. She hired a lawyer who sent us a cease and desist for harassment. She even showed up at our door one evening, without knocking this time, just standing on the sidewalk in her pastel armor, pleading in that fake sweet voice. Elena, surely we can resolve this like neighbors. I'll drop all fines. We'll amend the covenants. Just call off the investigation. Elena sipped her tea, looked Linda dead in the eye, and said the most beautiful sentence I've ever heard. Linda, the covenants don't apply to felonies. Talk to the DA. Linda's face crumpled. The woman who'd lorded over us for years, who'd weaponized politeness and petty rules until the whole street walked on eggshells, suddenly looked small, pathetic, human. And for the first time since we moved in, I didn't feel angry. I felt satisfied. The kind of deep, black humor satisfaction you get when the bully finally trips over the very rules she twisted. The special election happened on a sunny Saturday. Linda didn't even show up. Frank won by a landslide on a platform of actual common sense. The first thing the new board did was rescind every fine ever issued under Linda's reign and issue a formal apology to every family she'd targeted. Ours was read aloud at the next meeting. Neighbors clapped. Max got a ceremonial good boy certificate. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. Linda sold her house 3 months later. Last I heard, she moved to a condo downtown where there's no HOA and nobody cares if your dog barks. Good. Maybe she'll finally learn that real authority doesn't come from a pastel cardigan and a 3-ring binder full of made-up rules. It comes from the person who can look a gun in the face and smile. That night, Elena and I sat on the porch again. Same iced tea. Same dog at our feet. The neighborhood was quiet in the best way. No whispered rumors. No twitching curtains. Just normal people grilling and laughing like normal people should. I reached over and took her hand. You know, I said, for 6 months, I thought the only way out was to keep my mouth shut and let her bury us in paperwork. Turns out the best weapon was just waiting for her to overplay her hand. Elena chuckled softly. Most bullies don't expect the sheriff to answer the door. Big mistake. I laughed then, really laughed, for the first time since we moved here. Because here's the truth nobody says out loud. HOAs aren't about community. They're about control freaks dressing up their power trips in pretty language. And every once in a while, when one of them sends a fake cop to the wrong porch, The universe hands you the perfect punchline. Our home finally felt like ours again. Not because nothing happened, but because the right person had been standing in the doorway when it did. And somewhere across town, Linda Hargrove was probably measuring her new balcony to make sure the potted plants complied with, well, nothing. Because for once, nobody was watching. Sometimes the strongest protection isn't locks, cameras, or covenants. It's the calm, measured authority that knows exactly when and how to say, you picked the wrong house. Personal note: never let a Karen with a clipboard convince you her made-up rules trump real law. Stay patient. Document everything. And when she finally sends her clown to your door, smile. Justice tastes sweeter when it comes with handcuffs and a side of public humiliation.